Okay, welcome Chassos to the first interview style bit of content that I've done. My name is Jay, and I am today interviewing a player that went third at Uprising?
Third.
Third at Uprising with a Fisher Fury style list. Everybody, this is Hayden Walduck. Hayden, if you'd like to introduce yourself, man.
Thank you. G'day, guys. My name's Hayden. I'm a player residing from Gold Coast in Queensland. Been playing competitive 40k for about 12 years now. Started on Tau as my first army outside of your typical starter box. And, just fell in love with them. The aesthetics, the gameplay, just everything about them. So I found a fair bit of success with Tau in the tournament scene, locally and internationally. Multiple Queensland Masters winner, multiple Australian Masters winner, on the World Team Championship, so the WTC teams for Australia, playing Tau, and part of 4 winning Queensland ATC teams. So a bit of a 40k resume.
Hell of a resume. Yeah, I was about to say, took the words out of my mouth. All right, so we're going to be talking today specifically about Uprising, the list you had there. We will go into sort of some general stuff. Just a quick word to everybody. If you're enjoying this content and you want to support the channel and the studio, head to the link that you can see sort of just down below me. I'll leave one in the description. Over to the Patreon, where you can join all the other people that have access to the Pantheon Studios Australia Discord. They get access to discounted coaching and all the other wonderful things there. Thank you to all of my patrons. Couldn't do it without you. I will chuck up your names about now. Appreciate you guys. So Hayden, you're a member of now I hope I'm not going to butcher this, Grapple Factory Ethos or Ethos Grapple Factory?
Yeah, so last tournament season it was Grapple Factory Ethos. For this tournament season we have shortened it to just Ethos.
Oh, wonderful. Yep.
We had some BCP issues where, not going to name and shame, but some members would spell our team name wrong, and we'd play against each other round one. Because apparently it's very hard to spell a team right. Just ask the normal blokes, where some of them put in normal blokes, some of them put in the normal blokes, some of them put in TMB, and they end up playing each other.
Now, I saw you guys are sort of giving yourself a bit more exposure on Facebook and everything else. I will have a link down to that in the description, so go and show them some love. But what are you guys doing over there? Walk us through it a little bit.
Yeah, so what we are is we're a group of players from Queensland who are, of the higher skill level in the scene. We're made up of multiple team Australia players, multiple team Queensland players, Ozmaster players, Eric Thuris, Simon Gotchdick, myself. So we have a great pool of knowledge within that team. And we want to get a bit more out there in the content space of the prep a tournament player does for these big events. Just the deeper thoughts, a couple of those harder games, some recaps within some podcasts. So instead of going through and discussing 50% of all late games, we'll focus on one very difficult game potentially against another top player, and how we broke their list down, how we broke the game down, and how we, either came out with a win or kept it a very, very close game. So it's just going to be some really detailed, some really high-level content from some high-level players. We've got a couple of teammates in there who are some great painters. Nick Standing, guy from the Gold Coast, absolutely weapon with the airbrush. He can do some crazy paint jobs. So we'll get a bit of content of that out there, and just expand as the group sees fit.
Yeah, and as everybody watching this would know, Australia is currently the world champions, which means that we are the best players in the world. You just 100%, that's science. You can't argue with science. And if you want to actually get access to some of the people that made that a possibility, that were there themselves, go and follow them. Follow the link down in the description. you will get infinitely better surrounding yourselves with people that are bringing results with this game all the time. So go and check them out, and yeah, we will get into the interview proper. Hayden, you ran at Uprising. Now, you came third, which meant that you went undefeated for the entire event, but you just didn't have the BP to kick out number 1 and number 2. Is that correct?
Sort of, yeah. So the way the pods worked at Uprising was your first 6 rounds essentially seeded you into groups of 4 for the last day of 2 rounds to find out who wins their individual pods. So went 6-0 first 6 rounds. 6 great games, 6 good opponents. Managed to pull out 6 wins. Came into the top 2 last rounds of the event. Hit a Dark Angels player, Damien Ridgewell from New South Wales.
I was actually on a podcast with Alex Englezos with him just the other week. Yeah.
Yeah. Ended up going down by 2 points. Had a couple of unlucky swings. One of them costing me a decisive action turn.
Oh,
and as all Tau players know, when that happens, a little part of your soul dies, as mine did. And it happened turn 2, and I just paused for a couple of minutes, did some forward calculations, and I knew it was going to screw me at the end of the game. So I had to compensate through the rest of my turns. But yeah, ended up going down by 2 points to Damien. If I beat him, I would have played Liam Hackett for the win. Liam and I are pretty good mates. We've been on multiple Queensland teams, multiple Australia teams, and we had about a 15-minute chat and came to the conclusion that the Tau would have just sort of dragged him across the table in a couple of turns. So he thanked his lucky stars that game didn't happen. But yeah, and it ended up with the third, came home with the bronze. Unluckily enough, if I did take home the gold, I would have jumped Adam Napier for the best Tau in Australia as well.
Yes, you would have, because he was sitting on that almost like right after Codex release and then rode it all the way through the 2022 season. I actually don't know if he played Tau past our first or second round of nerfs.
I don't think so, no, because I think they pack a lot of tournaments pretty early on in their tournament schedule in their scene. Where Queensland have a pretty stacked back end. We're pretty active in the October, November, December, leading into Uprising in January. So you'll find a lot of the Queensland guys in the rankings sort of jump up and then leapfrog right at the end.
Yep.
But yeah, I had him sweating the whole event. Every time I walk past the judges' table, I'm like, oh, another step closer, another win closer to that goal.
Very good. So let's first and foremost go through your list. Now, I have lovingly called this the Duck Says Bork list.
I like it.
Now, you were running Bork Khan. Now, we had some pretty sweeping changes when Arcs of Omen came out. Not particularly because anything changed for us in a massive way. Obviously, the Crisis Suits and Bodyguards took a 5-point nerf. Commanders took a nerf. We had the Crew get nerfed. And really no other adjustments. The big thing for us, very likely, and this is, in my mind, what really drove the Crisis nerfs, not because they were in such a horrible place beforehand, but because we lost the troop tax, where, we were no longer required to do that when, in Nephilim, we were seeing a lot of lists that were packing, 3 units of Crew, and then just everything else we could from all the juicy stuff. When you saw those lists of changes and you saw how we were going to go, what drove you to build the list the way you did? Specifically, let's start in Bork Khan. Like, what jumped out at you from where before we were playing a lot of Tau Sept and Farsight Enclaves?
Yeah, good question. I was playing purely Tau Sept for a bit there, just for the addition of Long Strike and the vectored thrusters on the commander, just with the ability for him to go out, do whatever he wants, and you only have to worry about him getting shot or psychic because he'll never ever get charged.
Yep.
So I was sort of leaning into those 2 key components for a while. When the changes came out, first thing I looked at was, I didn't look at the Tau, I looked at the opponents. So first thing I saw was Flamers and T-Suns were probably gone. High chance that they just wouldn't be there. But there was a high chance that Custodes were coming. I absolutely knew Liam playing Custodes.
Yep.
I saw him play this list like 12 months ago,
Mm.
and as soon as I saw the nerfs undone, I said, I know what he's playing. So I knew that was coming. I knew the Dark Angel Termi bricks were coming. I knew just Terminators of any color were coming.
Mm.
And then we got the notification that Guard was allowed in.
Mm.
So look, I jumped straight to Borkhan for just everything that it brings. Its sub-faction trait of reducing strength is just amazing for knocking down the chip damage.
Mm.
You'll be surprised how much strength 7 there is and how much strength 4 there is.
Mm.
Strength 7 in, like Knight Helverin autocannons, which are not super deadly to Tau. They chew through you eventually, but it just gives you that extra little bit of resilience on them. Because unfortunately, you just can't hide all game on some tables. You have to come out.
Yep.
The Seeker of Perfection commander is an absolute weapon. And if you're playing Borkhan, you just don't leave home without him. He can just be such a harassment tool to a lot of those armies that do rely on good saves, multi wounds, but not a lot of mortal wound defense.
Yeah, and I found, because I actually ran your list at the Dice Arcade GT. Didn't have Walduck levels of success with it, but that was on me rather than anything else. And I will say that commander, just the double flamers going to AP1, having 2 AP2 burst cannons, even just that alone, you could see the anguish on my opponent's face knowing what was coming from a commander, and then going, and also, hey, 3 phase capped mortal wounds. And they go, cool, so I got to worry about that when you're shooting me, and then I've also got to worry about if I ever want to charge him. Even though we don't have the vectors and we're not going to just, kind of piss off as soon as somebody charges us, we're going to go, okay, I'm going to throw this massive stack of dice with 2 auto-hitting flamers. You're probably going to take some mortals on the charge, if you live. I loved him.
Yeah. Great psychological tool as well, because it forces people to keep something in their backfield so we can't jump behind them.
Yep.
If people are pushing resources forward and you leave a gap where you can jump over, clear a backfield objective, and be safe from a charge and be shot, then that's absolute money, and it'll ruin someone's day.
Yeah. 100%.
But yeah, he was definitely in there for that. And just utilizing the double commanders that now doesn't have to be Farsight.
Which was a massive change in Arcs of Omen. Being able to just plug in 2 commanders is something that, like, I know that it's a great gimmick for Farsight, but there is a little part of me that kind of wished we had this from the start, even just from the perspective, like, they're great output platforms, but also the buff that they bring is so unique and so wanted that there were a lot of instances where we would actually take the double patrol detachments when we could in Nephilim and Nakmund, that, it was a CP sync, so you wouldn't always see people doing it. Towards the end, we were in battalions, but just having each instance of those buffs, I felt was really, really great. Even though in this list, we weren't really using them because there were no crisis suits, there was nothing else. But yeah, and your second choice was an Enforcer commander, which I also, by the end of the tournament, fell in love with as well, which had triple cyclic, thermoneutronic, the Bagel Hunter, and Precision of the Hunter, which... he was a freaking monster. Just an absolute monster.
Half the time when you look at your opponent, you can sort of do a bit of a stat check on them. You go, if I leave this guy on an objective, what shooting do you have that can actually kill him, that can get through his great save, especially if you can tow him in cover. And mine did have 2 drones attached to him, so being able to pass to a drone.
Yep.
If you got shot by a high AP weapon and you take it on him first for the good chance of a save, and if you fail, you just pass it to a drone. So you don't have to worry about just removing a drone first, because you do have the option to actually pass that save before you kill off your drone with your saver protocols.
Yes. And for anybody watching that's not familiar with that interaction, when you start allocating in a shooting phase, you must choose a model and then keep allocating to that model until that model is dead. But save your protocols, it allows you to do it from drones in another unit, from drones that are attached to them. So what Hayden's talking about here is that if I have, let's say, for example, a railgun shot, and I go, cool, I'm going to take it on my commander, because if I'm in cover with the Bagel Hunter plate, I'm effectively on a 0-up save, which means I'm saving on 6s, which almost no other model will ever get. And then even if I fail it, cool, marker drone falls down for 1 CP because he's nearby. And then we just deal with the 3 mortal wounds with the 5 up, feel no pain. Now, obviously, that's an extreme example, but, somebody's hitting you with AP2 damage 2 weapons. If I'm on a 0 up save, I go back to a 2 up, and the commander is more likely to live than the drone is. So that's where if they hit you with incidental fire, sure, the drones can just take it so you're not taking weight. But if they hit you with something that can actually put in some work, then commander's a great option. So for anybody who's not familiar with that particular line of logic on how you allocate saves.
Yeah.
So we had that commander, then you had an ethereal plugged in, which is great because without the ethereal, you start on 1 CP with just normal generation, but with the ethereal, you're grabbing 2 CP on your turn and then 1 on your opponent's turn, which means effectively you start turn 3 if you go second with 3 CP, which is massive.
Yeah. There was also the little tech piece on him so 1 humble save, which is pretty common to give him praise on a 2+, but everyone assumed his second invocation was the 5+ shrug, the sense of stone.
Yes.
But the list has nothing viable to actually put it on. So what I took instead was Storm of Fire, which lets him invocation passes, action shoot.
Yep.
And I had a couple of tower players say, why have you given that to him? Ethereals have that as a command phase buff. And it came up a couple of times where, all of my infantry inside your fish, so you don't actually have the opportunity to put that command phase buff on anything. But as you said, you're banking up CP in my turn, their turn. When it comes back around, you've banked up, 2 to 3 CP. You forego your invocations in the command phase, and you can do it out of phase, say in the movement phase, when your pathfinders or breaches do get out of a transport, they do the aerospace, and then the ethereal will still let them shoot.
Yeah, because it's a stratagem that we have for you can invoke an invocation that you have not used yet this turn. That is an incredible bit of tech. That is real outside the box thinking.
Yeah. And it happened twice where turn 1, I got first turn, posed Montcar, which I'll get to that in a second. I got 2 pretty big hot takes for you, Jay.
Okay, all right, love it.
Chose Montcar, gone forward. I put 15 aerospace on the board turn 1, and one of my units still shot around the corner and did some crippling damage.
Excellent.
And it really it's a bit of a big dick play. You walk up and you go, I'm going to put 15 secondaries on your turn 1. You're scoring your decisive, and you're just putting a whole lot of front loading points, and it can really shake a player that's a bit iffy about the matchup. And it's a bit of that psychological game on the table.
Okay, excellent. So now that actually, and you know what, we'll finish the list before I get into it because this will be a long conversation when I start going down the philosophy of war trend. So outside of, because that finishes off your HQs, you had 2 breacher squads, and you also had because I'll go the Fish of Fury aspect of the list. You had 2 breacher squads with nothing attached to them, just as is. You had 2 Devilfish backing them up, and then you also had a Pathfinder team. And this one, I loved the tech on this, where you had all of their drone suite, and you had 3 rail rifles, and they were also stuffed into a Devilfish. And for anybody who's not familiar with some of the tech that you can do with Pathfinders, you can actually use them. If you're not ready for them to shoot, you can get them out of a Devilfish, where either combat debarkation or the Devilfish just stays stationary behind a bit of terrain. Pathfinders get out, you functionally go 10 inches because you're out 3 and then move 7. You use the recon sweep stratagem, they fire marker lights and on 2s, and then move back to the Devilfish, and because you're now in a new phase, you're allowed to re-embark within it. Which, as soon as I saw it, I was just like, there's some galaxy brain shit going on within this list, and I just, so let's talk about your Fish of Fury stuff. What drove you towards that from the Nephilim meta very much being bombers and crisis suits and, whatever you wanted to put around them to support them?
Yeah, so let's start on the Pathfinders. And with the recon sweep strat, I'll even take it that one little step further, which caught out a good half of my opponents.
Right,
So just to correct you on the get out, the drones move 10 base, and they get out 3. So the drones actually disembark 13.
No
and with
shit.
a 2-inch coherency and base size, you stay in normal legal coherency.
Okay.
So the first disembark is actually 13 from the edge. And then when they do the aerospace, it's the unit has to be within 6 of the objective. So the model that's within 6 can be a drone. Because the drone's not doing the action, the unit's doing the action.
Correct. Yes.
So you do get the extra little stretch out of it, which is great for hammer and anvil. So you can do the back corner one with pathfinders quite reliably with a Montcar pre-game move, combat disembarkation.
Yep. Excellent.
It's about a 42-inch stretch.
Yeah, that's enormous. That is absolutely enormous.
Yeah. And then the second little call out I got people on was, and I'm very upfront. I will explain a couple of my key strats before the game starts, as well as my key sub factions, relic, waller traits, all that stuff.
Yep.
By myself, I'm being quite polarizing at the table before the game starts. Hate gotchas. I hate all that stuff. I like a nice, clean game.
Yeah.
A clean victory, if you will. So if your vehicle doesn't do your combat disembarkation, so let's just say your Devilfish has chosen Montcar, it's pre-gamed up, and it's just sitting behind an L out of line of sight. My turn 1, I normally disembark the Pathfinders. So again, 13 out from the drones, 10 out from the guys, and then they do your recon sweep. And instead of moving back and embarking in the vehicle, they actually move forward again, and then they're allowed to charge. So there's nothing says they're not allowed to charge when they do the recon sweep. Exactly like Striker Fade.
Yes.
Yeah. So from that, you disembark 13 to the front of your drones. The drones will get a little restricted on the recon move because they move 10, the guys move 7. So you get about 22 inches, 21.5 inches out from your fish, and then you get a charge move. And people might be saying, well, why are you running and charging Pathfinders at people? We're Tau, we are worse than suck in combat. But with your move, your charge move, your pile, and your console, that can be a massive wall, a massive block. So if you find a lonely little rhino, a little, 5 plebs that you're not too worried about them punching you that hard in combat, you can lose a drone or 2 and a couple of Pathfinders. With your move and your 2, you consolidate your pile-ins, you can just create a massive line of move blocking. And for armies like Knights, who only the big boys can walk over models, anything that doesn't have fly, nothing that can heroic interrupt, you're pushing them and you're boxing them in their deployment zone turn 1, which is absolutely amazing against stuff like Genestealer Cult. You can pre-game move up and then get out of your vehicle. You have to stay 9 inches away from their blips in our movement phase. And the movement phase, they reveal the blips. Cool. Then you recon sweep forward and box it in.
Yeah, wow. And actually, I was thinking about that because I took Votan to Uprising. And if somebody were to do that to me, even if they don't touch my land fortresses, if they touch a unit that, because not a lot in my army really had a lot of really amazing dedicated melee. And you end up charging, something that's sitting in that back sort of area where, if I play against Tau, and I didn't in that tournament, but I would never expose 2 land fortresses to Riptides and Hammerheads and all that sort of stuff, because even though I can blank a save, that is a terrible way to play the odds. That is asking for somebody to do nasty things to you. And so I would hate to have it where they were already struggling to get out onto the midfield board by turn 3 or 4 or whatever. If somebody boxes me in turn 1, I look at that and go, okay, cool. If he gets rid of my bikes, I'm dead. Like that's just it. That is actually game done. And I actually did that move blocking stuff with my Votan bikes against Knights, and he couldn't play the game. You do that with a unit that's like 100 points and that's it. That is incredible. And the Devilfish can also get into a position which can be quite obnoxious. Because 21 inches on some missions and deployments, 21 inches is an enormous amount to just go, okay, cool, I'm sitting here and I'm going to die, but you aren't walking past here. Have fun.
It's also great for the resource battle. If the only thing you're giving up is a unit of Pathfinders and the rest of your army is built off of Ballistic Seal 2+ commanders, re-rolling to hit Hammerheads, and then Riptides as velocity trackers and marker lights on your commanders to supplement them,
Mm.
then you don't care about losing your marker lights for your pathfinders.
Yeah.
You'll happily give them up just to keep someone in their zone.
Mm.
So yeah, pathfinders, love them. If you're not playing them, give them a go.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And then so with that as your core, we then move on to you've got the 2 units of the love of my life, the Crude Hounds, which I have a video on exactly how to use that. And if you're interested in what Hayden is talking about with move blocking, go and watch that Crude Hound video. I do everything on the studio table, measure everything out, and show you exactly what your line of thinking is with using a 24-point unit to stop a knight from being able to do anything. And as you said, like they can walk over, but if you string out the Crude Hounds in a particularly obnoxious way, they can't even start the move because they can't finish it, which I imagine is a very similar thing to what you were doing with the Pathfinders, where, you just string them in a way that just is obnoxious. So go and watch that video. But the Crude Hounds, for me, are an auto-include at a minimum 2 units in almost every list that I've built. I've seen people running 3, which I love. And then the rest of it is, I believe you're running double Hammerhead, double Riptide?
Yeah.
So talk to me about, now the double Hammerhead, that makes sense. I believe you had 2 Seeker Missiles on each one, which is just a good bit of extra anti-tank. If you've got Marker Light support, you can out of line of sight throw those Seeker Missiles as well. Accelerated Burst Cannons for that point defense and a little bit of volume of fire when the fight starts getting really close. The Riptides, how did you have them equipped? Because obviously there's 3 War Gear slots that they can take up. So what was your decision making there?
Yeah. So first is the Ion Accelerator. I think it's the best suited for the meta. I probably wouldn't even look at the Heavy Burst Cannon, just my opinion. And just a disclaimer for this whole episode is my opinion and what I've found successful tower with. Doesn't mean you have to do it, guys. I don't want comments in my DMs saying I played this, you said it was good, and I lost. I don't want any of that.
Oh, but and it's not even that. Like I've had on, I put out a Ghost Kill video because the patrons bet me that I couldn't win an event with a Ghost Kill in my list. So I essentially took your list, plugged in a Ghost Kill instead of one of the Hammerheads and some other stuff, and ended up at the New South Wales Shark Tank RTT, which has like Macmillan and all those dudes that regularly go there, like my usual local. I end up going 2 and 1, only going down to the rank 3 Demons player in Australia. So like that one was a really, really hard matchup. And I had like people in the comments of the video just kind of going like, oh yeah, but you had Flamers, you should have this, and I run this, and I run this, and it's great. And I'm like, hey, tracking, get that, but you've really got to take into context, and I feel like there's a lot of people that don't think about that. They don't listen to stuff and just go, yeah, I'm listening to a dude's opinion and his personal experiences. They're like, no, but I haven't found that, so let me just like real quick.
Look, I'm going to say some stuff in this episode that I guarantee is going to ruffle some tower feathers. So just might want to put a just sensory advisory warning on the front of this episode.
No, I'm all about it because like I think that groupthink in terms of competitive is something that cripples innovation, and it means that we go to a stagnating place. And this is something where I've got a lot of overlap with, like I raid Mythic in World of Warcraft, and there are certain classes that I've found that just never get brought to stuff because community perception goes, no, this is what's good and this is what's not, and they look at like the top 1% of players or keys done or whatever else. And I feel like it's very similar. And there was a dude that I actually would love to get into contact with to talk about his list, that to a major American event took like triple broadside, tetras, and all this other sort of stuff. And he had a bunch of like really, really great success with it. He made a Reddit post going through all of it. And I'm like, this is great logic and it's great innovation for a player-place tournament. But you never get there if you never have people that actually challenge the status quo of something. Where, and obviously everybody's got like hot takes that just don't work. But when you can piece it together and actually get results on it, I feel like that is kind of the best thing for the community. So, hot take away. Don't hold yourself back.
Well, so to finish off my Ion Accelerator, Plasma Rifle on the back, and then your 3 support systems that, to be honest, I probably would never deviate from personally. It's Target Lock, Velocity Tracker, Multi-Tracker.
Now, talk us through that. Why wouldn't you deviate from those?
So Velocity Tracker is money. I like to hit things with +1 to hit with fly, because typically they'd have either a -1 to hit built in, or they can pop a -1 to hit strat. Looking at you, Eldari. And, I just don't like them. So I'd like the marker lights and the velocity tracker to put me back up to hitting on, 3s, at worst 4s.
Yep.
I don't like hitting on 5s. That's just a
sucks.
personal thing for me.
Yeah.
Don't like it. If I wanted to hit on 5s, I'd go play Orcs and I'd hate myself. I think you need target locks. I don't want to shoot an AP3 Riptide at a Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, Terminator, and cover, and they still get a pretty reliable save. You want to put them back to your invo. You want to put Custodes back to their invo.
Yep.
And then the multi-tracker is a bit of a meta pick. And it depends on how you're going to build your army. So I chose multi-trackers because the Riptides don't have to play aggressive. They can sort of choose whatever they want to do.
Yep.
And I wanted to be able to get that extra little bit of value against those Terminator blobs, the Custo blobs, the Gene Stealer Cold Bike units, your Dire Avenger 10-man units. And, if you listen to this podcast, you should probably know a thing or two about Tau, but in case you don't, you just get exploding 6s against 6 or more models.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people ask about this, it does stack with Kaoyun. There is nothing there is nothing that says it has an exception. And on the war gear, and this is something I get asked a lot as well, weirdly, it's saying only 1 per model is a war gear restriction, not the amount of explodes you can have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's my Riptide loadout. If I was, some people make a argument to take counter fire defense. So overwatching on 5s for 0 CP.
Early warning override. Yeah.
Early warning override. Sorry.
Yeah.
The counter fire defense is I just wouldn't bother with it. The mechanics of how it works with the rulebook, it's a bit clunky. Don't like it.
Yeah.
You pay your CP, which is 2 CP because the Riptide has so many wounds, to reduce the damage to 1, but you have to spend that CP, do that before you roll your save.
Yeah, and I mean, if they don't hit, if they don't wound, because it's when they allocate an attack to you. So you then have to go through their margin of error and then see if you save, and then potentially you've just spent 2 CP on something that was irrelevant anyway. Yeah, I hard agree. I wish they had worded it differently. I really feel like it could have been a really amazing piece of war gear if it was when you fail a save, spend 2 CP.
Yeah, just make it the exact same wording as Savior Protocols, but you don't have to kill a drone. Just do that.
100%. Yes.
Stop toying with this Games Workshop. So the early warning override is something that people do make an argument for. In this list, it's not sort of optimal. If I'm going to be overwatching, I'm going to be doing it on the Seeker Commander, or they're just not going to be charging anything that I want to overwatch with.
Yep.
So, if I was going to use that Overwatch stratagem resource anywhere, it would be on a Commander, not on a Riptide. It's nice to hit on 5s on Overwatch, but at the end of the day, I don't really want my Riptides being charged. I don't want them in combat.
Yeah. I mean, and that's sort of the way that this list sort of goes. And for anybody that doesn't really understand the role that Riptides fit for us, and Hayden, correct me if I've got this one wrong, but the Riptides aren't like what our Crisis Suits used to be, where it's a point and click, whatever I'm looking at, you are going to die. You throw the shots down range. They are additional to the more reliable Hammerhead. And yes, they can be swingy, but at the end of the day, re-rolling even on 4s is a 75% chance for that railgun shot to hit. You're throwing that down range as additive damage, and their backfield holders, their backfield threats that people have to worry about coming out late in the game when they've traded out resources and they're going, okay, I got a 2-up, 4-up, 14 wound model, potentially with a 5-up Feel No Pain. Can I actually get through it? Is that something that I'm wanting to go into? And Riptides aren't the sort of thing that you just go, okay, whatever I need to go away is going to go away with certainty, because it's not core. It has no re-rolls now that we're out of Tau Sept. It's very swingy. And really, it's 6 shots to the main gun and then 2 plasma shots. It's not overwhelming fire.
No. And in Borkhan, I actually found myself using them as screens more than anything half the time.
Really? Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah. So a big one I found was I was playing against a fellow team member, Simon Gotchdick, up
Mm,
in Queensland.
mm,
He was playing a Hell of Doom Eldar list.
yep.
He strat reserved, walked on his 10 Dire Avengers,
Mm,
and the only thing they could shoot was the Riptide.
mm,
Now, half the time, shooting Dire Avengers as a Riptide, they will just put a bunch of wounds on them. They'll just volume them up and just, make you take a bunch of saves.
mm,
But when you're reducing their strength 4 to strength 3, now they're back to winning on 6s. So
mm,
they need either a 6 to hit or a 6 to wound to do any damage.
mm,
And we haven't killed any, so they can't shoot twice yet. They come on, they do about 4 wounds to a Riptide.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I really did find that the choice for Borkan, not just the Riptides, but all of the vehicles, and you were talking about this
Mm.
before, where if I have a Devilfish, I'm like, okay, cool, you are either wounding me on 3s or better, or you're wounding me on 5s or worse. And that is a really, really good breakpoint to have. And it's the same thing with the Riptides. You either dedicate anti-tank stuff, which is strength 8 or higher, which sure there's plenty of it with like Marines all rocking melters now because it's all free and everything else, but you can't get around that. You're not stopping that anyway. And Tau Sept and Farsight Enclaves don't do that any better than anybody else. But all of the stuff that they don't like that they would want to throw into you because it's just point efficient or it's efficient for their armies, you then go, okay, cool, that's going to be winning on 5s. And all of a sudden it creates this extra step in their brain of, okay, do I have the volume to actually get through this? Will I be able to pop that and get that unit of breaches out, or get that unit of pathfinders out, or this Riptide, which is standing in front of me, being an absolute nuisance? Do I actually have to charge this thing, or, can I just shoot it off the board and put my fire elsewhere? And I think that that's a really, really great line of decision making to add to it, because I've found that at the highest levels of play, there are sometimes that altering your opponent's decision making without them knowing, whether they know you're doing it or not, altering their decision making will win more games than the results of dice rolls. Like, yeah.
It turns into a bit of an information war too. So, I played against Brody Middleton, great player who is in New South Wales, part of the New South Wales team, part of Team Australia for this year. And he was playing his Doom Eldar. And it got to a point where he goes, if I walk out my Dire Avengers and shoot your Riptide, he goes, because your Borkan, you drop it down, win on 6s. He goes, it's actually not even worth me doing it. And it's he was cluey enough to know the interaction before he committed to it. But if someone committed to that interaction not knowing about it, then it really plays on their mind, and then they have to shuffle around, and you find out once you start playing the list a little bit, you see a trend in your opponents where they start to split fire less. They start to focus all their anti-tank weapons on one of either your Devilfish or your Hammerheads, and it starts to, it really slows down the momentum of how they can chew through your units.
Yeah, absolutely. So that rounds off your list. 2000, or I think it's like in the ballpark between the 1995 and 2000 points. I think it was like 1998 points that
I think it was 98 because of the 224 point crew.
Yeah. So, and starting on 0 CP, which, I looked at everything in there, and I was, it actually felt like, even though we were starting on 0 CP, all of it had a purpose. All of it had something that was going to plug into a game plan and make that particular CP expenditure work for whatever you were trying to do. So let's talk through a little bit your games at Uprising. Now, the thing that I'm most curious about was, what was your more popular tactical philosophy to go? I found a lot of times I was actually going Montcar through the Dice Arcade GT and the RTT. It was actually more rare for me to even consider Cao Yun, with how the list kind of functions in some of the overlapping mechanics. What did you find yourself going?
Cao Yun is garbage. Just put it out there, guys. It is hot garbage.
All right, so talk us through it. Why is Cao Yun garbage?
If I came to you, let's say you're a humble guard player, and I say, you get Born Soldiers from turn 3, 4, and 5. The first thing you're going to do is write a hate letter to Games Workshop. So, the reason I choose Montcar is it gives you some inbuilt rerolls on your real ones to wound when you shoot your units, because Cow don't really have a function like a way to really effectively reroll ones to wound. Outside of your Farsight 1 free reroll or your Tau free reroll. So it gives you that little bit. It gives you your mobility. So you get to advance and shoot. Cows remain stationary. Awesome. It gives you those stretch for your fish, for your hammerheads, for your riptides. You can get around corners. You can get to angles that can't always do it. But the main choice has nothing to do with the benefits that Montcara Callion give you. It all directly relates to the game, the mission, your opponent, and your decisive action. So, because decisive action is such a great secondary, you if you're choosing Montcar, you only have to commit resources for the first 3 turns, and then you can just leave. You don't have to be anywhere you don't want to, and that's why I don't like Callion, because you're forced to stay in a spot where you kind of don't really want to. You kind of have to give people the early 12s on primary in some games. And as much as it's very fun to just turn 3, activate, and pull the rug out from under people and put some heavy points on people, I just don't like doing it.
Okay. Yeah, I hard agree with, maybe not Callion is garbage, because like obviously that's in the scope of this particular list and how it wins the game. But I've been saying for the longest time to so many people, stop thinking about Montcar and Callion as damage windows. They are not damage windows, they are scoring windows. They are game tempo windows. And it's even that, like, if I go against a player that either I know is a slow player, either intentionally or not, they're a newer player or they're a big question mark for me, there are sometimes I'll just go, cool, Montcar. I'm going to go and score 50 points in the first 3 turns of the game. And then if you're slow, if we run out of time, if we do whatever, I'm still set. Like, I'm good. And that's where I think that a lot of people misappropriate the tactical philosophies because they have those damage aspects attached to them. They look at them and go, okay, cool, I need to do all of my damage in here. But it's not the case. And particularly with a list like this, your combat debarkation for those first 3 turns, you're piling out 3 Devilfish if you want to. That is enormous. Even if you don't rip it every single game, having that flexibility and that option is just incredible.
Just having that wild card where you go, all 3 of these Devilfish have, a 12-inch move, a 9-inch disembark, and then your breaches at 8 inches are where they get their money.
After a 9-inch pre-game move because Montcar.
Yes, but with Borkan, that 8-inch short range goes to 12.
Which is fantastic.
Which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So to have that wild card up your sleeve to say, if you walk into that L to try and hide, I can put a unit behind there, I'll take your primary, and I'll hit that unit behind the wall. So I found the games where I did take Callion, I was only had, because you can only combat disembark with 1 unit if you're not in your Philosophy turns. Philosophy turns. And I just hated to have to pick one of my vehicles. I just want all 3 to be active from the get-go.
100%. And even from the other side of it, like if you as an opponent have somebody go, one of these vehicles who can move, super quick, one of those is going to have their guys get out. You're like, cool, I can deal with a unit of breaches. I can deal with 1 Devilfish. As soon as you start going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, you've got 3 Devilfish with 3 10-man units. And it's also, that other aspect of like your opponent knowing, okay, if I want to, I can go and get a 15 on secondary, shoot with one of those units, and then I've got everything else backing up behind that. That becomes an overload of resources that you need to worry about, knowing that stuff is going to be shooting you, because you're not always going to have, terrain layouts and whatever else where you're just like, cool, I'm going to be able to hide for the entire first turn. Like on a lot of deployments, even just the basic movement of a Devilfish with the pre-game move, its normal move so it can combat debark, 21 inches is freaking enormous on certain maps. So that's a really, really good take on it. And I would agree. Like when we were in the crisis heavy list with the bombers and everything else, Callion was great because you could still put down a lot of early pressure because you were doing a lot of damage at range. Or you could, redeploy to alpha strike people or whatever else. But that was an entirely different style. Those lists, you needed to remove your opponent to be able to win the game. Like you said, you just turn on at turn 3 and you spike up. I can't tell you the number of games where somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm doing really well. Like Jay's on like 20 points and blah, blah, blah. And then something flicks. And then by the end of the game, they're like, how did you get a 97 on this game? And, and it's like, well, I scored everything. And they go to the scoreboard and they're like, yeah, you literally scored everything in the last 3 turns. But yeah, so, and I really, really love that for this style of a list, because this list I found, it plays the mission so much better. It's not about how much can I remove. It is about how much can I block up my opponent, how much can I use my tricks playing my way at my tempo, and just kind of grab the game by the throat. And if they can't catch up, I've got it.
Yeah, the primary threat is so big with it as well. Being able to get all these guys out, or even just drip feed them one by one if you have to. But as Tau players, we have 2 pretty reliable secondaries. With this is in the in the Fisher Fury style list is your decisive action, always great. And this Fisher Fury plays the aerospace probably the best in any archetype under the Tau book. So you've got 2 pretty reliable secondaries, and then you're kind of hoping that your opponent will either give up a kill secondary through like no prisoners, abhor the witch, or like bring it down. You don't really want to have to grind them down. It's a bit of a manipulates the way you play too much, in my opinion.
How do you feel about a clean victory? Because you used that pun, so now I'm going to push you down that rabbit hole. So yeah, talk us through why is a clean victory not good for you?
So it's either 1 or 4 points, which is horrible to start with. There's no in between. And then it's capped in your philosophy turns, which sort of kind of wants to put you in the Callion bucket, because people will tend to hide on your first turn of Montcar. And it also gives people a very clear indication of where they need to put their resources in keeping units alive through, insane bravery on their morale, or CP rerolls on some saves, or just they just get a little bit of an out card, and I don't like giving people an out. So, we have 2 pretty reliably secondary that we can take. The third one can be a little bit up in the air some games. So as a Tau player, to really succeed, in my opinion, you need to have a pretty strong grasp on the primary. And the Fisher Fury list just does it so well. So usually I was playing some games, and the first time I zeroed someone's primary, it might be turn 2 or turn 3. They'll go to their turn, they'll go, all right, 0 for primary, and they'll look at the table and they'll just know that they've already lost.
Yeah. It can be very, very damaging to finish off the clean victory, because I was keen to get your take before I went into it, because I feel like I've been preaching a lot with, like patrons and doing coaching stuff and whatever, that a clean victory is strictly a worse grind them down, because for me, it not going to 15 is a big deal. As you said, it being 1 and then, 4 points. Like 4 points total for the round, but jumping from that 1 point for your first unit kill and then jumping for the other 2. And that's the other side of it. You need 3 full units killed. And it can't be from morale at the end of it. It needs to be a full wipe of them. And there are so many armies that you will, crippling damage for us doesn't have to be that the units are completely deleted. It can be that those units are just a shoestring of what they were at the start of our turn, and we know that they're not really a threat anymore. And so your opponent starts looking at uses for them outside of big damage or going and stealing an objective or whatever else. But this secondary makes it so that if you fail, if you get save spiked, if you get whatever else, bad luck. You get 1 point for that turn, and there are no other turns you're going to be able to catch that up on. At least with grind. If you get 4 turns of grind, you get 12. You're not bound by your tactical philosophy. You're not inside of a window your opponent can play around. And that's the other thing. I also do not like giving my opponent opportunities to outplay me. I have something that's not my efficacy to complete. I really love that point that you made, that aerospace, we complete it when we're good. We complete it when we've got the resources and we commit to it. Decisive action, we go and do something which is additive to the primary game, and it's something that I have efficacy over how I go and take. if my opponent decides to hide everything and just makes it really obnoxious, knowing that it's going to knock 12 off of my score, why would I give my opponent that kind of power? Like, it, yeah.
Look, I'd prefer to take grind them down and only score it for 3 turns. I'd take a soft 9 on grind them down than risking potentially getting a 12 on clean victory.
Yeah.
Let's say you've taken Montcar because the matchup in your first turn dictates that it's possibly the better choice, because it'll flow better into your into your decisive action.
Yeah.
And let's say you take Montcar and you only get one. Let's say, you know, someone saves spikes you and you only get the 1 point turn 1, but then you manage to get your bigger points your next couple of turns. You're at 9 anyway. You might as well take and grind them down for a potential 12 or 15.
Yes.
Look, if Games Workshop changed it tomorrow and it was 1 kill per unit and then an additional point if you kill 3 or more, then I'd probably take it. Okay. So I know if I kill a unit, you know, I could spend a couple of turns withering some units, getting them down to half strength, and then start just, you know, cleaning them all up and mopping them all up at the end. So I would do that if they change the secondary, but as it stands, I think it's a trap.
I really don't like that in arcs, when so many things got a glow up, so many things got an improvement, that our secondaries didn't cap at 15. I really feel like missing a turn and getting 10 is so much better than missing a turn and getting 8, or, you know, with a clean victory, missing a turn and maybe not completing it on another one, and so you're stuck with like 5 points. Like, it just, with how many armies there are that cap out at 15, and like I've had discussions with people that the faction specific ones really, I think every faction should have their secondaries be able to cap at 15. If that means that the way that they earn them and generate them changes a little bit from book to book, then fine. But having armies that look at their faction secondaries and go, I would never take you because, you know, like, you don't have the capacity to earn me what some basic bitch one from the core rulebook or the mission pack has, that doesn't feel as good. And yes, there are going to be scenarios where you do want to take them and you don't, and having choices is always good, but I don't feel like decisive is really ever a choice for me. That feels like it is in the dead category.
But because when I go to events, I have like a little whiteboard with all my scoring set up, so I don't have to use a bit of paper, I don't have to use a phone or anything. I have a whiteboard on a stand that sits at the end of the table, and
mate,
it's very polarizing. You've been playing
this game for a while, hey? You can always tell when the old boys rock up and they've got like the carts that collapse up and down, and they got individual shelves, and like you can spot them from a mile away.
Mate, I'm probably younger than you.
I don't doubt it, but you're an old boy because you've been playing this game for so long. It's like you're Benjamin buttoning a little bit, but yeah.
But anyways, I got my whiteboard scoreboard, and to be honest, I would safely pull out a permanent marker and write in aerospace and decisive action for my 2 secondaries. You know,
me too. Yeah.
If I'm feeling a bit frisky, if I'm feeling a bit lucky, I might go behind enemy lines instead of decisive action, because the Bishop Fury list can play it.
Yeah.
But look, that's a bit of a Chad move. If I rock up to the table and I say my tower army is going to be in your deployment zone in my secondary call before the game's even started, that radiates some confidence.
Yeah. And I would agree. And I think that something that I would really want to change about our army, because I know that we can alpha strike people. I know that being on the receiving end of Tau firepower when you're newer or there's not a lot of terrain can feel absolutely horrendous. But at the higher end, where people aren't giving you those opportunities and you're not blowing 1,500 points off the board every single, turn one, the scoring aspect is something that I find that I wish that we would get more attention to, because I feel like that would make our game a little bit better, and you wouldn't have to adjust any of our units or whatever. I don't think it'd push us back to a crisis sort of delete everything and score sort of list, because the changes that would make to the secondaries that we've got, I feel like could be very reasonable and very similar to what you were saying, where we just have reliable secondaries that don't make us win more. They're just, even in a loss, you're not losing by like 50 points or some shit. Like, it's not so feast or famine that, wins are spiky and losses are spiky.
And look, at the end of the day, having OBSEC in a transport or being able to give OBSEC in your command phase to a unit is just a core mechanic that just mends in with the gameplay, the rulebook, and your mission so well that it's something that kind of gets taken for granted until it comes in clutch for you. You know, if you have, let's say, a unit of 8 bound, charge a Devilfish, they absolutely take it to town and rip it to shreds, but you pile out OBSEC onto that objective, that's still your objective.
Yes, 100%.
And against an army like World Eaters who cannot shoot, it's huge to be able to throw a Devilfish onto an objective and go, well, you can either leave me here and I keep it, or you can go charge my Devilfish, kill it, I get OBSEC out onto it, and I still keep it.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's something that having transport play is so good, because you can do things like even baiting people where you put your transport just behind a little ruin that's away from an objective, and they go, cool, I can see the arse end of that, I'm going to shoot it, I'm going to whatever. And you go, cool, here's my breaches getting out onto the point. I now have this because I knew you couldn't get over to this point this turn. And now they safely hold this while I pick up 12 for my next turn. You thought I was going to get an 8, you let your guard down, and then all of a sudden they're standing there.
Or, I've done it a few times where it seems a bit weird to some people, and I've had to explain to a couple of guys, is I'd leave a Devilfish out purposely to get shot. And someone will come around, they'll move, let's say, a Knight out, and they go, I can see a Devilfish.
Yep.
I'll shoot it. Go for gold, mate. Let's say they kill the Devilfish. I'll then pile guys out back towards my Ethereal to then get the command phase buff to shoot in action, move over, do my aerospace, and I've lost no essential firepower. Devilfish doesn't bring that much to the table.
Yep.
So, problem with a bait is people don't know it's a bait until they find out it's a bait. And it can be game changing.
Yes, it can. 100%. And it's really good that, because you've gone down that route of not worrying about the feel no pain, because, who are you going to put it on? And actually having that, all right, cool, if they're standing out there because of that bait or whatever in my command phase, cool, they've got action and shoot. If I don't do that, they get out afterwards, my Ethereal standing there, bang, 1 CP, action and shoot.
Action and shoot, yeah.
That is probably going to be my biggest takeaway from this, because I had never actually considered that. That is a part of the book that I hadn't looked at. And I think it really shows just how much of an understanding of this army that you've got, that is a place that your brain went to in the army generation stage. So let's go through then your games at Uprising, if you remember them. So we had 8 rounds at Uprising. So even if you want to just do like a summary of each day, how did each day go? How are you feeling coming out of each one? And what would be some takeaways for some people that are wanting to kind of up their competitive game going into these multi-day events? Was there anything that you do that kind of gives you a bit more confidence, gives you a bit of an edge, or even just some weird rituals that you've got going into tournament play?
Yeah. So look, if you're playing 8 games over 3 days, it's hugely taxing. So you want to do the prep you can do before you get to the event. You want to pack and wear comfortable shoes. You're typically standing on concrete. Have a water bottle, stay hydrated, as much as it's fun as it is to, get on the beers and have a good time with your mates. If you're there to win the event, maybe stick to water throughout the day.
Though, shout out to the boys that were yelling Yabby every time they finished a beer. I had no idea what was going on until like halfway through day 2. And then when I thought about the number of times they got yelled out, I'm like, oh, these guys are wrecked. These guys are pounding them.
I find it hilarious probably the first 3 times, and then it just got super annoying.
I can feel that.
Yeah, so look, at the end of the day, look after yourself.
Yes.
Shoes, water, look after yourself. Because it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And then, as bad as it sounds, on games where you're going to win, don't push yourself.
Yeah.
Don't get sloppy, but don't push yourself. Don't go for that 97. Don't force yourself to get the 97, the Tau 100. Because we can't get 100s.
Yeah.
I call it the Tau 100.
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So pace yourself. Take your small wins in games where you know you're going to win anyway, and reserve your mental fortitude for the tougher games. I'll do a bit of a speed round while I can sort of recollect my games. I played against an Ulthway Eldar, which was favourable, paced myself. I played against a Freebooters Orcs list, which is a bit of a mixed bag with Gaz. Again, pretty favourable. Mate up here who plays all sorts of Orc lists, and I do pretty well against him pretty consistently. So again, paced myself, hit Brodie Middleton round 3, number 1 Eldar player in the ITC rankings. And I knew that's when I needed to hit the go button. So I was glad that I paced myself for the first 2 games, so I had juice in the tank for round 3. Coming into round 4, played against an Iron Hands Space Marine list. Usual suspects: drop pods, melter, dreadnoughts, all
the usual toys. Yep.
And thankfully, I had a relatively favourable table. That was the only game I chose Kai on.
Okay.
Because I wanted to wait out by his turn 3 to let his drop pods come in, let them shoot brute or free drones off of my vehicles. Then they do nothing. It's very easy to screen out 24-inch range multi-melters.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Especially in any deployment zone that's not like a Dawn of War style.
Yes.
So had a good win there. Moved on to a bloke by the name of Alex Terrison. Alex is a fellow Queensland player. We call him the Familiar because he's technically a familiar to a Patriarch. Patriarch being Eric Lafouris. They both play GSC style lists.
Yep.
Likes and whatnot. So Eric's the Patriarch and Alex is the Familiar.
Very good. Very good.
But Alex is in no way a bad player. He was taught at the hands of the Sensei himself, so he's got the training. Alex is a member of Team Queensland, member of Team Australia. So great player and typically a hard matchup for the Tower. So again, glad I got my 8 hours sleep. Glad I was drinking my water because it was a huge game and it came down to I think a difference of 8 or 9 points.
Yeah.
And then played Igor from New South Wales with his Obsec Monolith. Actually more of a problem than it sounds like, an Obsec Monolith.
Yeah.
And was able to pick up a close win against those Obsec Crons that just score so well.
Oh, they do. Yeah.
Which, getting that last win over Igor put me into the top 4 spot.
Yep. Excellent. So then you enter a pod and you're in there with Liam Hackett. You're in there with Jono Bishop, if I remember correctly. And also with who was your final one? It was
Damien.
It was Damien. It was the Dark Angels player. So now this is where it gets really interesting for me because if I'm remembering correctly, there was a mirror and a gentleman's agreement, which may have been the most big dick Giga Chad move I think I've ever heard of from a tournament. So do you want to run us through that?
Yeah, so look, both Jono and I, we kind of didn't really want to play the last game because this was round 8 of 8, after the third day of buying hammers, massive weekend. Neither of us were in a spot where we could win best Tau anymore. Dropped down to the best position being third with the way the pods worked. So neither of us could win best Tau. Neither of us could win the best ITC. Neither of us could win the event. And the worst we could finish was how we were currently seated anyway.
Yeah.
So we thought, the outcome of this game doesn't really matter. So Jono and I spent the first half hour, 45 minutes just talking about Tau stuff, sort of like you and I are doing now. So we hadn't even started the game. And we're like, we're almost an hour into the round. We better get going. I was like, oh. And, we had to play. We didn't really want to play, but we had to play. So we said, what about if we played combat? Wouldn't that be hilarious? And he was like, yeah, okay. We're like, all right, well, let's set some ground rules. So we had the ground rules of melee attacks only. So you could only use something with a melee profile. So your thermo commander was money. And you couldn't use any stratagems that were offensive. So we pretty much limited to the rulebook stratagems and like top bracket for a vehicle for our Riptides, and like a drone pass off, like a savior protocols.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
And then the only weapons that could be fired were a pistol.
Okay. All right. So you then got the breaches with the capacity to shoot. Then, what else is packing pistols within the list? The Pathfinders, I don't think have them because they got the Marker Light and the Pulse Rifle.
Don't think so. No.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just breaches.
Okay.
But it got to a point where I had breaches in my little back line. It was just a massive cluster in the middle of the table. We sort of just threw it in the middle of the table, just turned into a big like rock and sock and robot fight. And it got to a point where I was like, I'm just going to shoot some pistols, Jono. He's like, 12-inch range. I was like, 16, Borkan. So I shot some 16-inch range pistols at his Pathfinders. Look, hilarious.
Mate,
we got it all approved by the TO. The TO actually stood there. So Josh said, first person to shoot a weapon gets a red card. Are you both okay with it? We said yes. So he stood there and he watched the first couple of turns, and we had every TO walk in and had a look at the table. All had a laugh. We had one of the guys come in and Uber Eats us some Maccas just as a hilarious thing. So it was funny. It was really good.
Mate, that is so good. That is excellent. And I think Jono picked up an award for Combat Tower at the end of the event, didn't he?
Yeah. He got an award there.
That's so excellent. I love that.
Yeah, and part of the pre-game discussion, so Jono had a Taucept list relatively similar to mine, obviously in the Taucept sub-faction, but he had a third Riptide with a burst cannon.
Oh, yeah.
And a burst cannon Riptide does not much in the mirror. It'll kill some chaff, but it just doesn't put a dent in Hammerheads and Devilfish and other Riptides, where the iron actually scare them.
Yeah.
So we sort of came to the gentleman's agreement that he had 250 points of dead weight, and he only had one Hammerhead being long strike, where I had two.
Yeah.
So he goes, I got the extra Riptide, you got the extra Hammerhead. I said, well, I was going to start both my Hammerheads in Strat Reserve, because there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah,
and I'll always get
walk
the
on,
first shot.
They always get their value. Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, okay, fair enough. So we decided who won the game by who killed more points or who killed more stuff.
Yep.
And at the end of the game, he killed both of my two Riptides, but I killed all three of his Riptides.
That is wild that you guys did that in melee.
Yeah. Because we had an interaction between the two commanders. So his Thermo commander charged my Thermo commander. His was a cold star with the solid image projection and two drones.
Yes.
Mine was the enforcer. So my AP2 would put him back to a 4-up invo blank in the first save.
Yep.
But his AP2 would put me back to a 3-up armor save with my 5-up Furno Pain.
Yes.
So the map was about 10% better in my favour.
Okay.
That became who sort of consistently rolled that little bit better to make up for it.
Yeah.
So my Thermo commander killed his Thermo commander. But the problem is, any time a suit died, we were popping the
explode. So you're doing mortal wounds. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kill a Riptide. I'm like, oh, here we go. This guy's going to die. This guy's going to die. And that's how we chipped more sort of wounds down. Actually got through the game a little bit quicker.
Yep.
Because there was pretty much 2 to 3 mortal wounds every turn going into a splash zone.
That's so good. That is so good.
But look, just a very light way to finish an 8-round hectic event, which was pretty good.
I think is great. Like going into an environment where where you're going to finish, you know what it's going to be, and just deciding to have some fun with it. Like for me, honestly, that's peak 40k. That's because really this game for me is more about the social aspect than really anything else. Like I take my tournament seriously and I play hard, but from having played a bunch of team sports throughout my life, this kind of scratches that itch while also having a little bit of the nerd stuff and some RNG with the dice and whatever else. And so having that, I think hats off to both you and Jono. That is amazing. That is honestly amazing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're here to have a bit of fun, and Jono and I had an absolute blast. So
Now,
So
mate, in looking at the end of our chat, is there anything that you would like to do differently with the list? Is there anything with Tau that you're kind of toying and dicking around with at the moment for different play styles, or maybe a different style of list altogether? Where's your head at the moment with the faction?
yeah, so part of one of my hot takes is in my personal opinion, crisis blobs that you're investing 400 to 500, if not more points in, a crisis blob is garbage. And I haven't played with crisis since the first round of nerfs where plasma rifles went from 5 to 10 points base, and they took the first 5-point increase.
Yep.
So I haven't played with a crisis unit, like a 5-man unit essentially, since then. And for people who've been playing Tau, that's a long time. That's probably around, I think it was when Nephilim came out, about June.
Yeah, it would be about, yeah.
Or if not even before that. So I've been playing the Fisher Fury list for quite a while, and I think it's the strongest avenue of the book.
Okay.
So that's where I'm sort of concreted into. It suits my play style. It suits the scoring elements of the army, and that's where I'll sort of stay. I'm on a couple of Tau threads and forums and discords and whatnot, and the most common thing I see is people asking for list advice, and the first thing they say in their list is, I've got a crisis blob and I've got 2 riptides, and I'm going to strike and fade, shoot and move behind a wall all game. And it does my head in. I want to bang my head against the wall, because if you're a little bit clued on when you get to the table, you know a bit about Tau, you know how the Tau play. If I see a blob of crisis, I know they're going to be striking fading behind a wall, or bouncing in and out of walls to shoot, and I think it's quite easily played around if you're another top player. I think a top player can see it coming. They can map out your movements and your distances of what walls you can get to, cut off some angles, and they end up running aground where they do get trapped around, turn 3, turn 4, and you end up with almost a quarter of your army trapped in a unit that can just unfortunately get bogged down and die with the escalation of how the damage is going in the edition.
Yeah.
So I don't like it.
Okay.
It also has a flow-on effect with where your stratagems and where your resources are. Now, I don't take the crisis blobs because I want to put all that offense and all that resources into my double commanders. So having 2 commanders with the best ballistic skill in our book, so the most efficient shooting, the smallest footprint, and being able to be lookout certain, not shot back, striking, fading those, and using the 2 units, shoot the same unit, and get +1 AP. The name eludes me at the moment. So putting those damage resources onto your commanders that have such that little niche footprint that can get into spots, it's so hard for some people to shut down, because they have to commit to either come and go punch that guy in the face, or they have to either shoot him through a wall of like a devilfish plus the 10 guys that get out behind a wall, still look at sirring your commander, and it's such a nuisance for a lot of armies. And if you're a monophase army like World Eaters, who don't shoot, they don't psychic, they just punch you in the face in combat, you are never going to get to those commanders. They are just going to ruin your day.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can actually let you know, because after playing your list, I'm keen to see how crisis suits are going. So in my Shark Tank this Saturday, I'm actually going to be taking a crisis heavy list. So I'll flick you a message and I'll let you know how hard I get spanked. But yeah, I'm keen to try it out because I was a big fan of the crisis suits and I was playing them a lot through Nephilim, and I got very, very, very good with them. And I think it's sort of maybe a mirror of like how much you understand the Fisher Fury list. I basically could map out, if I could see even the toe of a unit, I would know exactly how much was going to die from that unit, or whether a vehicle was going to drop or not, or what I could do, what I could take, and how I was going to win those games. And I'm really keen to see, because I do think in arcs, because of the nerfs that we copped, like even before that, like having my favorite unit to have was double plasma missile pod, where you've got vertically stacked buffs with Shadow Sun and the auto winning sixes from Long Strike and counters Marker Light and all this sort of stuff. That was expensive before the nerf. And if you have like a 425 to 450 point unit with drones and everything else with them, going to 475 to almost 500 points, it starts to become really, really hard to validate, particularly because we also don't have the piece of tech, which was the bombers, which were our backline access. And a little bit of that play, which allowed us to stave off a bit of the aggression early in the game because people were so busy trying to deal with them that, you know, nobody was thinking about your back castles. So I am keen to see how it goes. I've teched into some stealth suits for the first time in the longest time because I want to have the ability to chuck a 5-man in Manta and Alpha Strike if I want to, or pull them back, which, you know, can catch some people out, but I'm not planning on taking somebody like, you know, like somebody the caliber of like, you know, Liam or yourself or whatever else. Like that is more for a mixed bag of like, if I can easily win games by using that piece of tech, then I will. And then against the harder ones, I just don't play that style or whatever. But I'm keen to see how it goes. But I think honestly that you're right. I think that in the current meta, playing the mission is so much more important. And having stuff that can gum up the works for your opponent with move blocking or, you know, all of the other tricks that we sort of talked about, I think that is better to have because generally speaking, it's better to have a toolbox that can solve multiple problems than have a laser cutter that's very good at one thing, but then it won't do anything else particularly well. I think that is really where we're going, and I think that's very strong.
Yeah, look, the only sort of crisis unit or the crisis entry I will happily put into any list without sort of second guessing myself is if I'm playing Farsight Enclaves, I'll put a 3-man unit in with like double flamer and a burst cannon and target locks just to have a 2 CP drop zone clear, drop them in, just volume the shit out of something.
And rerolling everything is amazing.
Yep. And it does, you know, I had that unit in my Team Australia list and it got me out of trouble, you know. If like because Harleys were quite big at the time, having 8 boats of Harleys inside. If you spend a turn just deboating all the Harleys, the Harley player goes, "Cool, I can still advance to charge. I'll run up and advance to charge you." If you've mapped out your screens properly, then you have a unit of 3 crisis suits coming in, and this happened twice because I played against 2 Harley boat spam in Belgium. That one unit dropped in and picked up over 20 Harleys in a single activation. And for a Harley player, if you drop in and pick up 20 of their boys, they do not like it.
That's pretty much game. Like, what do they even win the game with after that?
Yep. They're pretty minimal points investment. You can get them for relatively cheap, you know, under 250 points. Their footprint's quite small, so you can still hide them. You can start them on the table if you really need to. You know, that they have that flexibility and they're not a point sink. They're not something that, you know, if they don't get to shoot for a turn, because I found, you know, some people can just bunker down and, you know, if your 500 point crisis suit unit is not shooting for 2 turns of the game, or they're just shooting trash, like nothing of value, then, you know, it's a bit of a waste of a quarter of your list. And I just didn't like it. You know, I like to squeeze every inch of efficiency out of an army. And a quarter of it not shooting stuff I want to shoot at is just not efficient in my books.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great, 100%. So, Hayden, we're almost at the end of our chat, mate. Is there anything else that you particularly feel like we haven't covered? Anything else that you think people out there should really, really know with Towers of Faction or the local scene or whatever else?
Yeah, of course. It's so something I'm quite passionate and quite strong about is the way you equip your commanders.
Okay.
Now, as a public service announcement to everyone, I'm going to say I found more success tooling my commanders to quality volume than some just core good shots, which means I don't take plasma rifles on my commanders. I don't take fusion blasters on my commanders. The highest sort of strength AP damage gun I'll take on my commanders will be a cyclic iron blaster, typically on your Precision of the Hunter commander. And now in Arcs of Omen, you should be taking 2 commanders, just as a little foreshadowing there.
Now,
you need.
Oh, sorry. You keep going.
Yeah. You know, to cop the 1 CP tax to have 2 of the best units in the book, you should be doing it.
Yeah. So walk us through why do you favor that volume over that really short? Because a plasma rifle and a fusion blaster within their range brackets, they are very reliable at a very specific thing. Why is it the volume is so much better for you?
Yeah, so the volume becomes good in having a takes all comers list. So if you're putting your plasma rifles, your fusions, and to some extent your missiles, but I see very commonly people putting double plasmas on a commander, and it makes me cringe. Because if, let's say, you go to an event and round 1 you play Eldari, those plasma rifles have a very specific couple of targets that you want to shoot at, being your vehicles or your bikes or anything that the 3 damage will sort of one tap. And then let's say next round you play against, let's say you're playing against Custodes, and the variance between the 2 games is you'll have a great profile damage against, say, the Custodes, but then not as good against the Eldar or Eldari list. Where, let's say you took, a high output burst. Let's say, for perfect example, the Secret Perfection Commander. So you got your high output burst cannon, you got your advanced burst cannon, and then your double flamers. Does minimal to units like Custodes, but absolutely tears the ass out of an Eldari army.
Oh yeah.
But by doing it and the way it's teched, all those burst cannons going to AP2 with Secret Perfection. Being a Cold Star, he'll ignore cover. So he's putting those Custodes back to a 4-op save anyway. It might take 3 failed saves to kill one instead of 1 failed save. But you're getting more of those dice through. You're getting more of the opportunity to push the damage through. If your Custodes player pops your Transhuman, you got a 50% chance of wounding the unit, and then another 50 of them fouling their 4-up imbo. And, it could just be 3 turns in a row, all your plasmas hit, half the wound. You kill 1 Custo from 3 saves, they fail 1 4-up imbo.
Yeah.
You spent 3 turns to kill 1 Custo, where if you get more damage over time with your volume, you'll chip away at them a little bit faster. And on a platform that can't be interacted back with, you get so much volume.
Oh yeah,
and I think learning to manage that resource effectively, and if you can keep that unit shooting for 5 turns of the game, you will see your tower results go up. Like I would happily take 4 commanders if I could, which I did. Playing for Australia, I took a Farsight list. It was double patrol, and it had 4 commanders. It had 3 Cold Stars and an Enforcer. They did everything. I didn't have plasma rifles on them. It was just all volume. They essentially all had double missile pod and then all their burst cannons. And I went into some games and people were like, "Well, where's your plasma rifles? Where's where's your AP3? Like, or where's your AP4 and 3 damage?" I said, "I don't need it. I'll just make you take 1,000,000 saves."
and I think that's the thing that, like, when I'm looking at matches like Custodes, it's very often that they throw 1 dice and they'll see a 4-up. It's literally a 50-50 chance they mitigate it. And that's after getting through the hit phase. That's after getting through the wound phase. Yeah. But if you're firing on average, like with a commander, like 28 shots with that commander that we're talking about, those 28 shots with full rerolls, you're very likely to get through like 20 of them. And then you got mortal wounds on top. I would rather somebody throw 20 dice and have all of those opportunities. And then you think about something like the tech of the Secret Perfection Commander. If I'm throwing, let's say, 25 wound rolls, because hitting on 2s, you're very likely to get it through. But let's say you get super unlucky. 25 wound rolls, getting 3 of them to be 6s is not freaking hard to do. That's
no,
unless you're me and you fail 2 turns in a row. It did actually happen against Astra Militarum, but
okay.
But if I'm doing that and I'm like, okay, cool. So here is this enormous bucket of dice. I hope you brought your own bucket, and there's 3 mortal wounds on top. Custodians
Yep.
players are going to start sweating. If they're like, cool, I've got a dice that I need to throw, and if I need to, I can just CP re-roll it if it really matters that much. That is, I very much agree. It means that the commanders can't be anti-vehicle or whatever, but I mean, realistically, you don't kind of want them to. If your commanders are having to go into that, then you've either been really unlucky with angles or terrain or whatever, and your hammerheads have gotten picked off, or your riptides are just gone. But really the commanders fit that a very, very specific role. And even then, with full rerolls and mortals and everything else, they can take quite a few wounds off a vehicle just out of volume alone.
Yep, 100%. And if you're not worried about being shot back because you look outserved and you're protecting them efficiently, and you're putting them in the right spots to not be charged, and still being a battle suit, you can still make people neg 2 to their charges. They can still strike and fade. I would rather put those resources into the commander and just have him shooting for all 5 turns of the game, and have him in any spot he wants and threatening any part of the table I want all game. But just because it takes you 2 turns to kill a rhino instead of shooting a bunch of plasma at it and killing it 1 turn doesn't make it a worse choice.
Yes.
It just makes it a different choice, and it makes it different how you play that in your game. So I think if you start taking towards a bit more of a quality volume from your commanders and putting them in the right spots, you'll see some better results.
Yeah. And, really when you're looking at volume, if that sort of thing that we were talking about before where you hate hitting on 5s, if you take volume that's hitting on 5s, you're like, yeah, cool, it's still kind of dog shit. Like, and orcs have this problem. And you actually reference them by name that, they throw a billion dice, but if you're hitting on 5s, you may get done with that. When you've got something with the sheer number of excellent warlord traits and relics that we have, prototype systems that they have, and actually this came up in a coaching session I had today where they were asking about prototype systems for crisis suits. And I was saying that, like, really Stim Injectors is the only one that I think actually has any play. Most of the prototype systems are tech towards commanders that can effectively use them, get value across the course of a game, and actually interact with a lot of the stacking things like Precision the Hunter, like Seeker of Perfection. Even there's a world where Farsight, not a world, like Farsight Enclave's Warlord trait is fucking fantastic. Because, there's a wound capped or phase capped or feel no pain things in the game that can be really obnoxious until you tell them they don't have it anymore. And if you roll 6s to wound, all of this stuff has an additional 3 AP or whatever it is. That immediately makes this amazing output platform hitting on 2s, finishing off a Bloodthirster or finishing off Gaz where they thought they were safe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really rate Master of the Killing Blow, the Farsight Enclave's war trait. Because a couple of 6s in your, let's say, 20 average shots from a high output and a couple of burst cannons, instantly that AP1 burst cannon becomes AP4, ignoring cover because you're a cold star. Like that's enough to make a Marine shake in his power armor, and it flows on to the next point is I never put an invulnerable save on my commanders. I don't want to.
I'm the same. No, yeah,
I hate it. I see people pay for a shield generator on them, or they put a solid image on them, and I just think, what a waste. You have that 4th slot where you take your ballistic skill 2+ gun. It's not a BS2 platform. It's on a fast mobile platform. Take it, and just don't put them in a position where they need to use that shield generator.
Yeah,
lean on their movement, lean on savior protocols, stratagem, and I think over the course of the whole tournament at Uprising, I lost 3 commanders over 8 games,
which is a great rate of safety on them, because I can almost guarantee if I asked you to recall their total damage done over the course of 8 games, it would be astronomical. I can guarantee that right now. It would be obscene.
Huge.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. I really enjoyed when when the book first came out, toying around with the relics, and the solid image projection unit stood out to me if I needed to do that. But I was also, when the book first came out, still very, very new to 40k. It was like, at this point last year, I had played in like 1 tournament. And so I was getting my head around a lot of stuff, and And I was like, yeah, cool. And then as my play progressed, I just found that across games, I was never using it. Nobody was ever shooting at him. And at the moments where it mattered, I was like, cool. I mean, the game's done anyway. Like, why do I care if he's here or not when I've got my value out of him? And it kind of puts me in a mindset where I'm like, and I've never run this relic, but I would first put an Onager gauntlet onto a Cold Star, then I would run a solid image projection unit. Or one thing that I've got a lot of value out of is the EM Scrambler, because I play in a meta which is very heavy demons, very heavy GSC, and all that sort of thing. And when you tell a player like that, no, you're not coming in within this 12-inch bubble, and you've got stuff within that bubble that they really want, that is crippling for them. That can disrupt an entire game plan. And I don't even run that relic all that often. It's only when I really have the CP to do it, when I've ticked all the boxes I know I need to tick. And yeah, so I agree. I see these lists come out where people have paid for a shield gen or they've gone for that. And I just think like your commander is just a little bit worse because of it. And you know, just because you're getting results on it, I can only really stand behind something when I know that one, it's being played by a top tier player, two, into other top tier players in highly competitive environments. Because I took a ghost gear list and did okay with it. But I know that if I went to an event where I was seal clubbing, I would win that event. 100% hands down, not even a problem. I would not even break a sweat. And that's not a criticism of anybody else, but that's me knowing that I have been able to rub shoulders with some of the best players that I lucked into one of the best teams in New South Wales. And so I've had that experience. I've had that trial by fire. I've had people kind of guiding me and other people haven't. You go to like, you know, you go out into the center of New South Wales somewhere to a town that has a population of like maybe a couple of thousand people. They run like 2 Warhammer tournaments a year. And you go out there and you monster everybody. Nobody should walk away from that being like, oh, I'm the best player ever. Like, I'm basically Liam Hackett. Like, yeah, let's go. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? And so I think that even though, and this is where you start getting into sort of the scientific side of 40K, results-based reasoning actually isn't a reason to say something is good or bad. You need to have replicability where you can take that particular thing into multiple environments and still achieve something that was the intent for it to achieve. And you need to have a breadth of not just me being able to play something, but somebody else able to pick up the same thing and go, yes, I believe I can get results out of this.
Yeah, and there's also another layer of complexity of, you know, if I can squeeze every point of efficiency out of something, but if someone else picked up my list and they can't, it's that next level of, again, the information war. When you come to the table, if someone has played against another person using, for example, my list, and they, you know, they played their commanders a little bit more passively, and you know they didn't, you know, get a bit ballsy with them. They go, oh, cool, you know, I can mosey up the table, but you know, then you come to a table and you play against someone who knows what their capacity is in and out, and they might play a little bit more aggressive with them, cut off the firing angles, and you go, hold on, this guy's playing how I didn't really expect it. It's I know that they can do this, but you don't, and that would give me the upper hand in a hard matchup.
Yeah, and I actually found, and this is where I'm going to be playing, you know, your list or even like my own sort of variations on it or whatever else, because I have a lot of experience playing the crisis heavy lists. And when I took this one to the Dice Arcade GT, because another way that I've improved a lot is that I'm very, very self-critical, not in a damaging way, but after every single game, my brain will run through and I have no problem calling me out for all the things that either in post or in the moment I know were the wrong thing, or that I mispositioned, or I did whatever. And so when I was running the list, that lack of experience, even though I'm good with the faction and I'm good at the game, it showed through for me that I was really, really fortunate that really the only like massively top tier player that I went against was Chris O'Neill in the last round. And because he's a good mate of mine, we just made a meme of it because nobody could win. We weren't whatever. And we were like, hey, let's just throw some dice and have some fun. Like, who gives a shit? It's the last round. And I was really lucky because I think if I went into somebody that was on their main faction and was really sweating it out like you can at certain GTs, I probably would have got my ass handed to me because I didn't have the sheer reps that you need. And this is the other thing where people pick up a list, and I really hope that anybody watching this actually does this. pick up the list and don't just run it 2 or 3 times. Run this list to death. Be critical of everything you're doing. Try and work out everything. Never assume that you know everything or you are at the pinnacle that you can be, because I guarantee that I personally, running this list in 6 months' time, I will not be the same player. And I will put down entirely different results just from that exposure and that experience.
Yeah. And look, as you said, off the back of Uprising, I have changed the list. I have made some tweaks.
Oh, cool.
And
do you mind sharing what you've gone through?
look, I've made some tweaks for the upcoming events. We have a inter-club event in Queensland here.
Okay.
Thankfully, in southeast Queensland, we have about 7 different clubs.
That's fantastic.
Over the course of about 100k radius.
Yep.
So in 2 weeks, we're all getting together for an inter-club team event to raise money for the WTC team, for Team Australia.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
So great cause, great little event. But we're using that as a bit of a predecessor in training for Team Queensland. Going to ATC. So I've made some tweaks to my current tower concept leading into that. So I might not be able to give you information on it now, but come May, I can give you a little bit more.
That would actually be really, really cool. And after it's sort of gone through the the ringer and it's lists go public and all that sort of stuff, I would actually love to chat to you about it, because I really loved in Arcs of Omen that it feels like there has been a ton of innovation within the army. And this has probably been the most exciting season for me in my short tenure, because it didn't feel like there was just one clear choice that was really, really good and you didn't really want to deviate too much from it. I love the sheer breadth of things that we're seeing that are actually bringing in some results. It feels really, really good from a competitive standpoint, that when I pull up BCP, I'm not seeing the same tower list every single time, which just feels kind of nice. But,
look, I think Tau has the depth in the book in a relatively balanced meta. So prior to the last balance, which made Terminators get free war gear and undid all the custodes buffs. So pre-data slate then, I was confident with my Tau list that I could beat any singles list at the event.
Okay, yeah.
So I think Tau has the depth, it has the customizable options in your commanders, the mobility, it has everything that it needs to win an event. I think last tournament season that we just finished, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything. I think I lost 5 games all season.
No shit. That is incredible.
Yeah. If I recall off the top of my head, I lost to Chris Wright at Ozmasters for the win.
Which, I mean, Chris Wright is an incredible... For anybody who doesn't know him, Chris is an incredible player. Losing to him is not the same as losing to almost any other individual.
And I think it was within single digits difference as well. So, I lost to Eric Lathuris at the Northside Open, so a 70-player GT.
Which, the sensei himself, as you said.
Again, best mate, fellow Team Australia player.
Yep.
I lost 2 games to WTC. One of them sort of thrown under the bus to save the rest of the team. And another was a sort of 11-9 loss after a Devilfish went nuclear. Unfortunately, it happens.
Yeah,
it did about
it does. It does.
It did about 19 mortal wounds in a bubble, which is horrendous. And then I lost my game at Uprising.
Right, again, which is Damien on Dark Angels, which again there's nothing that anybody should feel bad at. And for anybody who's not familiar, intimately with the team sort of thing, getting bust is a very, very real thing that every player that goes to a team's event will have to deal with at some stage, because teams events they can be very, very skew oriented, where there are some armies that are just absolutely fantastic into a short list of things. And then and this is where you start getting into a conversation about swords and shields and all that sort of thing. But getting bust is something that every player, in my opinion, needs to accept, because it's more about the team winning than it is about any single individual's performance. So that one, like getting bust, I wouldn't even count that off your list of losses.
Nah.
That's just that's cost of doing business. That's kind of
that was collateral damage for team I was taking home the gold, so I copped that one on the chin. But
and going down to the number one, I mean, that's even more. That's kind of a hey, it could have been worse. I think I finished out the last ITC season on Tau with I think I was on like an 82% win rate or something with the faction, which felt really, really good, especially given that it was my first and only competitive year of play. And a lot of those I can hand on heart say that I versed a lot of good players, a lot of very good players, and it felt really, really good. The only crippling loss I ever had was to Alex Englazos at Masters in New South Wales. And that was into his AdMech list that, shoves an army basically like onto your side of the board and then into your rectum, and he just puppets you any way he wants. But like going down Alex for me is kind of like, it's like going down to Chris, right? He's such a great player that what do you do? So mate, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. Really, really hope that everybody that's watching it got something out of all of the things. I really struggled to see where somebody wouldn't be able to find some value, because there was some genuinely awesome tips about the faction. I'm really, really keen to see how your teams go and talk about those changes, because obviously, for anybody that's not familiar, we're not discussing it because teams is probably the most competitive environment you can go into, and people's lists are very important to keep on the DL, not knowing exactly what everybody's got, so there's no tailoring or whatever else. So if you don't know why we're not talking about it, secrecy is 100% needed before those events. So we will try and get a breakdown afterwards, or even just stalk his BCP and just see what he's run and all that sort of stuff. But mate, it has been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on, and I really, really hope that this isn't our only chat.
No, look, pleasure. Happy to come on. Always happy to talk Tau, and for all the Tau enthusiasts out there, bring on the new Farsight model.
Oh yes, 100%. We are very, very likely going to get sent that model by Irresistible Force, so I will make sure that I get that painted up immediately, get a game in with it, give you guys a little bit of a breakdown. I don't know that Farsight's rules are going to be changing, but at the very least, a little bit of eye candy if I can manage it. And also, make sure that you go to the link in the description. Go and check out Ethos. There are some of the best players in Australia there. Go and benefit from everything they're doing. Some of the painters that they have are incredible. Make sure that you're a part of that. So, Hayden, thank you so much. And, mate, I will talk to you very soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.